I expected the pitying looks and the whispers about my divorce when I walked back into my childhood home, but I was not prepared for the conversation drifting out of the kitchen. "We don't need her anymore," my sister said, her voice sharp as glass. Then my father, the man I was trying so hard to comfort, whispered the words that would burn everything down. "We have to find a way to get rid of her." The rain in Briar Glen always smelled of wet asphalt and old pine needles, a scent that instantly dragged me back to being 16 years old and desperate to leave. I had not lived here in 15 years. I had built a life, a career, and a marriage in Chicago. And then I had watched two of those three things dissolve into a quiet, gray sort of nothingness. I was 33 years old, divorced, and childless, and now I was motherless. Returning to the house on Elm Street felt less like coming home and more like walking onto a stage where everyone else had already memorized their lines. The house was exactly as I remembered it, a sprawling colonial that my father, Gordon Foster, had spent 40 years maintaining with obsessive devotion. The shutters were painted a crisp black, the lawn was edged with geometric precision, but inside, the air felt stagnant, heavy with the cloying scent of lilies and casseroles sent by neighbors. My father was sitting in his leather armchair in the den when I walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered. Gordon Foster had always been a man of physical presence, broad-shouldered from decades of running Foster and Pine contracting, loud with his opinions, quick with his laugh. Now, he looked like a suit of clothes that had been let out too much. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his jaw. "Lydia," he stood up, his movement shaky, and hugged me. He smelled of scotch and peppermint. "I am so glad you are here," he said, his voice cracking. "I did not know if I could get through tomorrow without you." I held him tight, feeling the sharpness of his shoulder blades. "I am here, Dad. I am not going anywhere." From the kitchen, the click of heels announced my sister, Mallory. She was 2 years younger than me, but had always acted 5 years older. She swept into the den wearing a fitted black dress that looked expensive and appropriate. Her hair pulled back in a severe, glossy knot. She held a clipboard. "You made good time," Mallory said, offering me a cheek to kiss. "I expected you later. Did you hit traffic on the pike?" "No, it was clear," I said. I pulled back and looked at her. She looked tired but focused, vibrating with that manic energy she always got when there was a project to manage. Grief, for Mallory, was apparently just another event to coordinate. "Good," she said, checking something off her list. "The florist is coming at 4. The catering drop-off is at 5. I need you to look over the obituary draft one last time. Lydia, but please do not change anything major because the paper goes to print at 6. I can help with the flowers," I said. Mallory gave me a tight, sympathetic smile. The kind of smile you give a child who asks to help cook dinner. "You just rest, Lydia. You look exhausted. It has been a rough year for you. I have got this handled. Dad needs you to just sit with him. That is the best thing you can do." She turned to our father, her voice softening into a tone I recognized. It was the tone she used for clients. "Dad, did you drink that water I brought you?" "You are dehydrated." "I am fine, Mal," he muttered, sitting back down. Mallory looked at me again, her eyes sweeping over my jeans and travel-worn sweater. "Go change, Lydia. People will be stopping by soon." I went upstairs to my old room. It had been converted into a guest room years ago, stripped of my posters and books, replaced with generic beige bedding and a painting of a boat. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. I felt untethered. Mallory was the captain of this ship. I was just a passenger who had washed ashore. The memorial service the next day was a blur of black wool and murmured condolences. The church was full. My mother, Evelyn Foster, had been a pillar of Briar Glen, active in the library fund, the garden club, the historical society. She was the kind of woman who wrote thank you notes for thank you notes. Everyone loved her. Everyone missed her. I stood in the receiving line next to my father, shaking hand after hand. I felt brittle. My divorce was finalized 3 months ago. and I could see the knowledge of it in the eyes of the older women who hugged me. They held on a second too long, their pity radiating off them like heat. "So hard for you, Lydia, Mrs." Gable whispered, patting my arm. "To lose your mother right when you are all alone." "I am okay," I said automatically. Mallory was everywhere at once. She guided guests to the guest book. She adjusted Dad's tie. She handed tissues to crying cousins. She was perfect. She was the daughter who stayed, the daughter who married a local dentist, who gave Mom 2 grandkids, even if they were currently with the nanny, and who was now holding the family together. I overheard her talking to Aunt Sarah near the coffee urn. "Lydia is doing the best she can," Mallory was saying, her voice low and concerned. "But you know how fragile she has been lately. The divorce really broke her. I am just trying to make sure she does not have to make any big decisions right now. She is not in a place for it." I stepped back. Stinging. Fragile. That was the narrative. Lydia the mess. Lydia who could not keep a husband. Lydia who ran away to the city and came back broken. After the service, the house was filled with people. The noise was overwhelming. Around 7 in the evening, the crowd began to thin out. I retreated to the sunroom to breathe, staring out at the darkening backyard. The rain had started again. I realized I had left my phone in the kitchen. I walked back through the dining room, moving quietly over the thick oriental rugs. The house was nearly empty now, just the immediate family and a few close friends lingering in the foyer. I approached the kitchen swinging door. It was pushed open just a crack. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the clinking of glass. "We don't need her anymore." The voice was Mallory's. It was not her public voice, the warm, capable tone she used for the guests. It was cold, flat, and irritated. I stopped. My hand hovered over the door. Then I heard my father. His voice was a rasp, barely audible, but in the quiet kitchen. It carried, "We have to find a way to get rid of her." My heart hammered against my ribs. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Get rid of me? I stood frozen, my mind racing to find a benign explanation. Maybe they were talking about a housekeeper? A nurse? No. The hospice nurses had left yesterday. Then Mallory spoke again. "She is going to ask questions. Dad, she is already looking at the furniture like she is cataloging it. If she sees the books..." "Shh," my father hissed. I pushed the door open. They were standing by the island. Mallory was wrapping leftover ham in foil. My father was leaning against the counter, holding a glass of scotch with a shaking hand. They both froze when they saw me. The shift was instantaneous. It was terrifyingly impressive. Mallory's face smoothed out. She smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. "Oh, there you are. Lydia, we were just saying we need to get rid of all this extra food. We do not need it anymore. Now that the guests are gone, we should send some home with the neighbors." My father looked down at his drink. His knuckles were white. "Yes," he mumbled. "Too much ham." I stared at them. The sentence played on a loop in my head. "We have to find a way to get rid of her." That did not sound like ham. "I forgot my phone," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I walked over to the counter, grabbed my phone, and looked at my father. He refused to meet my eyes. "Dad?" I asked. "Are you okay?" "I am just tired." "Lydia," he said, turning away to rinse his glass in the sink. "The conversation is over. Go get some sleep. We have the lawyer in the morning." I went upstairs. But I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the rain. I tried to be rational. I was grieving. I was stressed. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe they meant get rid of her as in get me out of the house so I could go back to my life in Chicago. Maybe they were trying to protect me from the burden of the estate. But the tone, the whisper, it sat in my stomach like a stone. The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple. We drove to the offices of Alder and Wren Legal Group in my father's car. The silence was thick. Mallory sat in the front seat, checking emails on her phone. I sat in the back, feeling like a child being driven to school. The office smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Mr. Alder, a man who had been my parents' attorney for 30 years, sat behind a massive mahogany desk. He looked grave. "I am sorry we are meeting under these circumstances," he said, shuffling a stack of documents. Evelyn was a wonderful woman. He began to read the will. It was standard legalese, mostly expected. The house to Gordon, the investments to Gordon, personal effects divided between us. Then he got to the executorship. I appoint my daughters, Lydia Foster and Mallory Foster, as co-executors of this, my last will and testament, to act jointly in all matters regarding the administration of my estate. The room went silent. Mallory sat up straighter. "Excuse me? Mr." Alder looked over his glasses. "You and Lydia are co-executors." Mallory laughed. A sharp, incredulous sound. "That has to be a mistake. Mom told me last year she was changing it. She knew Lydia was busy. She said she was going to update it so I could handle everything. I saw the draft. My father said," he spoke quickly, looking at the lawyer. "Evelyn showed me a draft where Mallory was the sole executor." "Mr." Alder shook his head. "I have no record of a signed amendment. Gordon, the will dated 4 years ago is the standing document. Lydia and Mallory are co-executors. Both signatures will be required for any asset liquidation, any transfers, and the closing of the estate." I looked at Mallory. Her face was flushed. She turned to me, her eyes wide with a performance of shock. I just thought she started, then sighed. "Well, obviously we can make it work. It is just that you are in Chicago." Lydia. "It is going to be a logistical nightmare to get you to sign everything. I can stay for a while," I said quietly. "My job is remote." Mallory's jaw tightened, just for a fraction of a second, before she forced a smile. "Of course, that would be helpful." We left the office with a stack of paperwork. The tension in the car was palpable. When we got back to the house, I needed to do something. I needed to feel useful. I remembered my mother kept a file box in the hall closet, a beige metal box where she kept birth certificates, social security cards, and insurance policies. She was meticulous. I opened the closet door. The shelf was eye level. I saw the winter coats, the vacuum cleaner, the stacks of board games. The spot where the metal box always sat was empty. There was a rectangle of dust on the shelf, a clean, distinct rectangle where the box had been recently. I went into the kitchen. Mallory was frantically typing on her laptop at the table. "Mal, where is Mom's file box?" I asked. "The beige one. I wanted to check the insurance policy numbers for the lawyer." Mallory did not look up. "Oh, we tossed it." I blinked. "You tossed it?" "It was full of old junk," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "Expired warranties, manuals for appliances we do not even own anymore. When the hospice nurses brought in the hospital bed, we had to clear out a bunch of space. It must have gotten thrown out in the chaos." I stood there, processing this. My mother never kept junk. That box contained our social security cards. It had the deed to the house. Mom kept important papers in there. I said. Mallory finally looked up, her eyes cold. "Lydia, stop." Mom was on heavy painkillers for the last 6 months. She started shoving random receipts and napkins in there. It was trash. Dad has all the important documents in his safe at the office. Stop looking for problems. She made me feel crazy. She said it with such authority that I almost believed her. Almost. But the dust rectangle was fresh. My phone rang in my pocket. It was a local number. I answered it, stepping into the hallway. "Hello? Ms. Foster? This is Sarah Jenkins from Briar Glen Community Trust. I am so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." "Sarah, I am calling because you are listed as a contact on your mother's personal checking account. We flagged some unusual activity this morning, and since the account is now part of the estate, I wanted to verify." Suddenly, the phone was snatched from my hand. Mallory stood there, breathing hard. She put the phone to her ear. "Sarah? Hi, it is Mallory. Yes, Lydia just handed me the phone. She is a little overwhelmed right now." I reached for the phone. Mallory turned her back to me. "Yes, I know about those charges," Mallory said into the phone, laughing lightly. "It is just the autopay confusion we talked about. Mom had those subscriptions set up on the wrong card. I will come down and sign the stop payment forms tomorrow." Yes. Okay. Thanks. Sarah. She hung up and handed the phone back to me. What was that? I asked, my voice rising. Mallory rolled her eyes. Just a mess with Mom's Amazon and Netflix subscriptions. They tried to charge the account 3 times. I handled it. The banker said, unusual activity. I said, it is handled. Lydia. Mallory stepped closer to me. Her perfume was overpowering. Why are you being so paranoid? Do you not trust me? It is not about trust. I said, I am a co-executor. I need to know what is happening. Mallory sighed. A long, exasperated sound. You are stressing Dad out. Can you hear him in the other room? He is coughing again. Please. Lydia, just let me do what I'm good at. Go sit with him. I walked past her into the living room. My father was staring out the window, his hands clasped behind his back. Dad, I said. He jumped. As if I had shouted, I walked over to him. Dad, what is going on? Mallory is acting strange about the bank. The file box is missing. And I heard what you said in the kitchen last night. He turned to me. His face was pale, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. Lydia, please, he whispered. You said you had to get rid of me. I said. He flinched. You misunderstood. We were talking about the clutter. The house is full of things we do not need. He grabbed my hand. His grip was clammy. Listen to me. Just sign what the lawyer sends you. Do not fight Mallory on the details. She knows the business. She knows the town. Why? I asked. Why should I just sign? Because I am tired, he snapped, his voice suddenly loud. I just buried my wife. Lydia, I cannot handle you two fighting over every penny. Just make it easy. Please. For me. Do not make this harder than it has to be. He looked so desperate, so broken, that my anger deflated. He was a grieving old man. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the divorce had made me suspicious of everyone. Okay. Dad, I said softly. I will try. He patted my hand, but he did not look relieved. He looked terrified. I went to my room early that night. The house felt hostile. The floorboards creaked like they were warning me. I opened my laptop to check my email, needing a connection to the outside world, to my job, to anything that made sense. There was an email in my inbox with the subject line, Thinking of You. It was from Trent Hale. Trent was an old family friend, a guy who had grown up with us, taken over his dad's landscaping business, and hovered around the edges of our lives for years. He was Mallory's friend, really. I opened it. Hi, Lydia. I saw you at the service yesterday but didn't want to intrude. You look like you were holding it together. But I know how hard this hits. I was talking to Mallory, and she mentioned you're staying for a while. That's good. But be careful. Grief can make people spiral. I've seen it happen. Sometimes taking a break, stepping away from all the paperwork and the decisions, is the only way to stay sane. Don't let the estate stuff drag you down. Your mom wouldn't want you falling apart. Let me know if you need to grab a coffee. Best. Trent. I read the email twice. Grief can make people spiral. Falling apart. It was written like a kindness, but it felt like a script. It echoed exactly what Mallory had said to Aunt Sarah. Fragile. Unstable. They were building a wall around me, brick by brick, and I was already inside. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Down in the driveway, under the yellow glow of the floodlight, I saw my father standing by his car. He was on his cell phone. He was not smoking. He had quit 20 years ago, but he was pacing back and forth, gesturing wildly with his free hand. I cracked the window open just an inch. The rain hissed against the glass. I could not hear his words, but I heard the tone. He was pleading. He stopped pacing and looked up at the house. He looked right at my window. I pulled back into the shadows, my heart thumping. I was not imagining this. The missing box, the whisper in the kitchen, the banker, the email. We have to find a way to get rid of her. I looked at the door of my bedroom. It had a lock. For the first time in my life, in the house where I grew up, I walked over and turned the latch. I was not going to spiral. I was not going to break. I was going to find out what they were hiding. The silence in my mother's house was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against my eardrums. I had come over alone, ostensibly to look for a specific photo album for the thank you cards, but really to prove to myself that I was not losing my mind. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of the study, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. My mother, Evelyn, had been a woman of systems. Her desk was not just a workspace, it was a command center. Every pen had a partner, every paperclip lived in the magnetic holder. I sat in her chair, the leather creaking beneath me, and let my eyes drift over the surface. It looked right at first glance. The blotter was straight, the calendar was turned to the correct month. But as I opened the top right drawer, the one where she kept her immediate to-do files, I felt a prickle of unease. The files were color-coded. I knew this because I had helped her set up the system 5 years ago. Green for financial, red for medical, blue for house maintenance. They should have been in alphabetical order within those colors. They were not. A blue file labeled gutters was sandwiched between 2 red medical files. A green file for tax prep was shoved to the back, bent at the corner. I pulled them out, my heart starting a slow, heavy thumping rhythm. Someone had rifled through these. They had not just looked, they had searched with haste. I reached for the second drawer, the deep one meant for hanging files. I pushed the folders back, checking the bottom of the drawer. My mother often kept a flat manila folder there for things she was currently reviewing, things that did not have a home yet. It was empty, but there, on the dark wood of the drawer bottom, was a faint, pale rectangle of dust. I stared at it. The dust around the rectangle was a fine, gray layer, accumulated over months of neglect while my mother was sick. The rectangle itself was cleaner, darker. Something the size of a legal folder had been sitting there until very recently. I touched the wood. It was cool. Someone had removed a file, not a thief looking for cash, but someone who knew my mother's habits. Someone who knew that the bottom of the second drawer was where she hid the things she was worried about. I closed the drawer, my hands trembling. Later that afternoon, I drove to the office of Marina Klein. She was an associate at Alder and Wren, the attorney specifically assigned to handle the probate details while Mr. Alder managed the high-level oversight. Her office was modern, sterile, and smelled faintly of vanilla hand sanitizer. Marina was young, perhaps my age, with a sharp bob and glasses that looked like they cost more than my first car. She did not smile when I entered. She offered me a seat with a gesture that felt more like a command than an invitation. "Ms. Foster," she said, "I was not expecting you until the full review next week. I needed to understand the timeline," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I wanted to request copies of all the financial documents you have received so far." Marina sighed, a tiny expulsion of air through her nose. She clicked her mouse, staring at her screen. "Mallory already has the digital Dropbox link. She said she would share it with you. I would prefer my own access." "Please," I said, as co-executor. Marina stopped typing and looked at me. Her expression was polite, but behind the lenses, her eyes were guarded. "Look, Ms. Foster, I know this is a difficult time. Mallory mentioned that you are dealing with a lot of personal transition right now. The divorce, the move." I stiffened. "What does that have to do with the estate?" Marina clasped her hands on the desk. "We just want to make sure the process is efficient. Mallory has been very proactive. She's been handling the day-to-day coordination with the house and the accounts. We do not want to duplicate efforts or create confusion. Sometimes, when there are too many cooks in the kitchen, especially when one cook is dealing with significant grief, mistakes happen." She was speaking to me as if I were a liability. Mallory had gotten to her first. I could hear the echo of my sister's voice in Marina's professional jargon. "Lydia is fragile. Lydia is overwhelmed. I am perfectly capable of reading a balance sheet." "Marina," I said, my voice hardening, "please send the link to my email by the end of the day." Marina paused, then nodded once. "Of course." She reached for a folder on her desk. "While you are here, there is something we should discuss. Mallory brought this over yesterday. She thought you should see it, just so we are all on the same page about your mother's intentions. She slid a document across the desk. It was a single page, typed on my mother's personalized stationery. It was titled, Codicil to Last Will and Testament. I read it quickly. It was a simple paragraph stating that upon her death, the executorship should pass solely to Mallory Foster, citing Mallory's proximity to the estate and familiarity with the family business. It also adjusted the distribution of personal property, giving Mallory first right of refusal on all jewelry and furniture. I looked at the bottom of the page. The signature line was blank. It is unsigned, I said. Looking up, yes, Marina said. But Mallory found it in your mother's bedside table. It is dated 3 months ago. It strongly suggests that this was her final wish. She likely just never got around to notarizing it because of her illness. It is not a legal document. I said, legally, no, Marina conceded. But morally? Mallory feels strongly that we should honor the spirit of it. She is not asking to change the financial split. Lydia, she just wants the authority to manage the estate without friction. She thinks it would be a kindness to you, to let you off the hook. I stared at the blank line. A kindness. My mother was a notary public for 20 years. I said, she knew the law. If she wanted this signed, she would have signed it. She had visitors every day. She had you. Marina took the paper back. I'm just passing along the sentiment. Ms. Foster, families often choose to honor these kinds of drafts to keep the peace. Mallory is very concerned that fighting over technicalities will tear the family apart. I stood up. The room felt too small. I will wait for that link, I said. When I got back to my car, I sat for a long time with the engine off. The world outside was gray and flat. I checked my phone. There was a notification from my auto insurance provider. Urgent. Policy cancellation warning. I frowned. I paid my premiums every 6 months. I was paid up through August. I dialed the customer service number, putting the car in gear while I waited on hold. I drove aimlessly, just needing to be moving. State Farm. This is Eric. How can I help you? Hi. I said, I got a notice about a cancellation. My name is Lydia Foster. One moment. Ms. Foster, I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Ah, I see the note here. It looks like the mail we sent to your new address was returned as undeliverable, so the system flagged the account. Since we could not verify the garaging address, the policy is set to lapse in 48 hours. My new address? I asked. I haven't moved. I still live in Chicago. There was a pause. The notes here say you called last Tuesday to update your address to 114 Elm Street, Briar Glen, Massachusetts, and to change the billing to a paper statement. My stomach dropped. 114 Elm Street was my parents' house. And last Tuesday? I was on a plane last Tuesday. I did not make that change. I said, okay, well, we can fix it, but we sent the premium bill to the Briar Glen address. And since it was returned... Wait, I interrupted. Who called? Did they have my password? They verified your social and your mother's maiden name. Eric said, it was a female caller. She said she was you. I pulled the car over to the curb. My hands were sweating against the steering wheel. Mallory. She knew my social. We had opened joint accounts years ago for a family trip. She knew everything. She tried to move my insurance to Briar Glen. Knowing I would never see the paper bill because she controlled the mail at the house, she wanted the policy to lapse. Why? To make me look irresponsible? To stop me from driving? Reverse the change. I said, I am keeping my Chicago address, and put a password on the account. A verbal password. Done. Eric said, is there anything else? No. I said. I hung up and stared at the dashboard. It was a small thing. A clerical error. She would call it. I was just trying to help. Lydia, you're here now. I thought it would be easier, but it wasn't help. It was sabotage. It was a brick in the wall she was building. The wall labeled, Lydia can't handle her life. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mallory. Dad is asking if you're coming for dinner. Also, we need to talk about living arrangements. It's silly for you to pay for a hotel or whatever. Just move into the guest room properly. We can save the estate money. I stared at the screen. Move in. Be contained. Be watched. If I moved into the house, I would never have a private moment. My mail would be hers. My conversations would be hers. I typed back. I found a place, short-term rental on Juniper Street. Moving in tomorrow. Tell Dad I'll see him Sunday. I did not wait for her reply. I drove straight to the rental agency on Main Street. The apartment was small. The furniture smelled of lemon pledge and dust, but it had a deadbolt, and it was mine. The next few days were a blur of logistics. I moved my 2 suitcases into the apartment on Juniper Street. It was the second floor of a converted Victorian. Quiet and dim. I set up my laptop on the scratched dining table and tried to work, but my mind kept drifting back to the house on Elm Street. I went over there every day to check on my father. Gordon was deteriorating. He was not eating. He spent his days shuffling from room to room, moving piles of paper from one table to another. On Wednesday, I found him in the garden. It was cold, a raw wind blowing off the reservoir, but he was standing by the hydrangeas in just his shirt sleeves. He had his phone pressed to his ear. I stopped at the corner of the house. I cannot do it this week, he was saying. His voice was low, pleading. You have to give me more time. She is asking questions. No, I know. I know what I signed. He paused, listening. Do not threaten me. Trent, we go back 30 years. Trent? Trent Hale? The family friend who had emailed me about spiraling? My father turned and saw me. He jumped, nearly dropping the phone. He ended the call immediately, shoving the phone into his pocket. Lydia, he said, his voice too loud. I did not hear you pull up. Who were you talking to? Dad? I asked, walking over to him. No one, just business. Old supplier. They are wondering about the invoices. You said Trent. I said, he wiped his forehead. He was sweating despite the cold. Trent Hale. He is helping me with some of the landscaping contracts. We have a lot of backlog. Dad, I said gently, you look sick. Is something going on with the business? Is there debt we do not know about? He snapped. His face flushed a dark, unhealthy red. Stop it, Lydia. Stop digging. Everything is fine. Mallory is handling the books. Why can you not just trust your sister? Why do you have to come in here and pick everything apart? I am not trying to pick it apart. I said, I am trying to help. Then help by leaving me alone, he shouted. He turned and stormed back into the house, slamming the sliding glass door so hard the pane rattled. I stood in the cold garden, the wind biting through my coat. My father was not grieving. He was terrified. I went inside to make tea, trying to calm my own shaking hands. The kitchen trash can was full. Mallory usually emptied it every morning, but she had been at the dentist with her kids all day. I pulled the bag out to tie it up. As I did, a crumpled piece of thermal paper fell out and landed on the tile. I picked it up. It was a receipt. Northgate Storage. Unit 402. Date: January 20th. January 20th. That was 3 days after my mother died. 2 days before the funeral. The customer name at the top was Evelyn Foster. I stared at the name. My mother was dead on January 20th. She was in the morgue. She was not renting storage units. Someone had used her ID. Someone had walked into Northgate Storage, claimed to be Evelyn Foster, or perhaps used a power of attorney that was no longer valid post-death, and rented a unit to hide something. Mallory? It had to be Mallory. She had my mother's wallet. She had the credit cards. I smoothed the receipt out on the counter. Why? Why rent a unit in a dead woman's name? Unless you wanted to move things out of the house, files, assets, evidence, and make sure no one connected it to you, if the unit was discovered. It would look like Mom rented it, a secret stash, a hidden life. I folded the receipt and put it in my bra. It was the safest place I could think of. I heard the front door open. Mallory breezed in, bringing a gust of cold air and the scent of expensive perfume. Hey, she called out. I saw your car. Dad is in the den. He says he has a headache. Did you upset him? She walked into the kitchen, dropping her keys on the counter. She looked radiant. Her cheeks flushed from the wind. She looked like the picture of the dutiful, capable daughter. I leaned against the sink, crossing my arms. "Mal," I said. She paused, sensing the shift in the air. "What?" "I found a receipt," I said, "for a storage unit, rented 3 days ago, in Mom's name." Mallory did not flinch. She did not blink. She just tilted her head, a look of mild confusion on her face. "A storage unit?" "Oh, right. That. You rented a unit in a dead woman's name. Mallory, that is fraud." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "God, Lydia, you are so dramatic. It is not fraud. Mom asked me to do it. Mom was dead," I said, "before she died." "Lydia." Mallory opened the fridge and took out a bottle of water. She told me she had a bunch of old gifts and things she wanted to donate but didn't want Dad to see because he gets sentimental. She asked me to move them out. I just didn't get around to it until last week. I used her card because it was her stuff. It is estate business. You rented it 3 days after she died, I repeated. And why hide it? Why is the file box missing? Why did you try to cancel my car insurance? Mallory slammed the fridge door. "Okay, stop," she said. Her voice dropped, becoming low and venomous. "Stop this." "Stop what?" "Asking questions? Stop being paranoid," she hissed. She walked toward me, her heels clicking on the tile. "Look at you. You are shaking. You are obsessing over receipts and mail. Do you know what you sound like? You sound like you are having a breakdown. I am not." Trent noticed it. She interrupted. "Marina noticed it. Even Dad sees it. You are projecting. Lydia. Your life fell apart in Chicago. You lost your husband. You lost your job?" "I did not lose my job," I said, "and now you are coming here and trying to find a villain because you cannot handle the sadness. You are inventing conspiracies because the reality is too boring and too sad. Mom died. Dad is old. I am busy. That is it. There is no mystery." She was close to me now, her eyes boring into mine. "You need to get a grip," she whispered, "or people are going to start thinking you are not capable of being here. And I would hate for Dad to see you like this. He is already so worried about your stability." It was a masterclass. She took every piece of evidence I had and twisted it into a symptom of my own mental decline. I looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was not worried about me. She was warning me. "I am fine, Mallory," I said, forcing my voice to be level, "and I am not going anywhere." She held my gaze for a second longer, then stepped back and smiled. "A bright fake switch. Good. I'm glad to hear it. Now, if you are done interrogating me, I have to go make dinner for our father. Since I am the one actually taking care of him." I left the house. My legs felt like jelly. I drove back to my rental on Juniper Street. I locked the door. I pulled the shades down. I sat at the table and took the receipt out of my bra. I took out my phone and screenshotted the call log showing the insurance call. I opened my laptop and created a new document. I named it the log. January 24th. I typed, "Confronted Mal about Northgate Storage Unit 402. She claimed Mom asked for it, admitted to using Mom's card post-death, accused me of paranoia, explicitly mentioned my stability." I typed out the incident with the car insurance. I typed out the missing file box. I typed out the conversation in the garden with Dad and Trent Hale. My fingers flew across the keys. I was terrified. If I was wrong, if Mallory was right, and I was just a grieving, divorced woman looking for drama, then I was hurting my family. But I looked at the receipt again. Evelyn Foster. My mother would never have asked Mallory to use her credit card after she was dead. My mother respected the law. My mother respected the truth. Mallory was lying. Dad was hiding. And if I did not write it all down, if I did not build a wall of facts to stand behind, they were going to bury me. They were going to paint me as the crazy sister, the unstable one, the one who needed to be removed. I saved the file to the cloud. Then I saved it to a thumb drive. Then I emailed it to my personal account. I looked at the empty apartment. It was quiet. I was alone, but I was awake. The wind at Northgate Storage cut right through my wool coat, a biting chill that felt personal. The facility was a grid of corrugated metal doors painted a dull, industrial orange, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It sat on the edge of town, where the strip malls gave way to scrubby pine forests and abandoned lots. It was the kind of place people put things they wanted to forget. I walked into the front office. It smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. A young man with a pierced eyebrow was sitting behind the counter, watching a video on his phone. "Can I help you?" he asked, barely looking up. I put on my most authoritative voice, the one I used when managing difficult clients in Chicago. "My name is Lydia Foster. I am the co-executor of the estate of Evelyn Foster. I believe my mother, or perhaps my sister acting on her behalf, rented Unit 402 recently. I need to access it to inventory the contents." The clerk tapped a few keys on his computer. Foster, yeah. Unit 402, rented January 20th. "Great," I said, reaching for my purse. "I need to get in. I have the death certificate and the executor paperwork if you need to see them." He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Access is code restricted, unless you have the 6-digit PIN and the physical key for the padlock. I can't let you in. Policy." I leaned against the counter. "Look, I just drove all the way from the city. My sister is busy with the funeral arrangements. She forgot to give me the code. Can't you just override it? I can prove who I am." He looked at me then, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I can't do that. Lady, the renter set the code." I tried a different angle. "Okay, can you at least tell me who signed the rental agreement? Was it Evelyn Foster? Or was it Mallory Foster?" He hesitated, glancing at the screen. "It is listed under Evelyn Foster, but what?" I pressed. He shrugged. "I wasn't the one working the desk that day, but my manager mentioned it. He said it was weird because the lady on the ID was, older. But the guy who came in to pay for it and move the boxes was a dude." My stomach dropped. "A man?" "Yeah, older guy. Tall, broad shoulders. Looked like he had the weight of the world on him. Said he was helping his wife clean out the attic." I gripped the edge of the counter. "My father. Gordon Foster. It wasn't just Mallory. My father, the man who had wept in my arms, the man who looked so frail and confused, had driven here 3 days after his wife died. He had used her ID to rent a storage unit and hide what? Boxes? Papers? Did he say anything else?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Just that he wanted a unit in the back row. The clerk said, away from the cameras, said he didn't want people snooping." I thanked him and walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, shaking, away from the cameras. My father was not a victim of Mallory's scheming. He was a participant. The realization made me feel sick, a physical nausea that roiled in my gut. I had been protecting him. I had been worrying about his grief, his health, his fragility, and all the while, he had been driving boxes of evidence to a metal shed on the edge of town to hide them from me. I needed help, real help, not the polite, compromised assistance of Marina Klein. I pulled out my phone and called a coworker from my Chicago firm, a paralegal named David, who seemed to know a guy in every state. "David," I said, "I need a lawyer in Massachusetts, not a corporate shark. I need someone local, someone who knows probate, someone who isn't part of the country club set, someone who won't care who my father is. Give me an hour," David said. 40 minutes later, he texted me a name and a number, Seth Marlowe. He operates out of a strip mall in Revere, but he is sharp. He hates bullies. I met Seth Marlowe the next morning at a diner halfway between Briar Glen and Boston. He did not look like a lawyer. He looked like a retired geography teacher. He wore a rumpled corduroy jacket and wire-rimmed glasses, and he was eating a bagel with intense concentration. I sat down and laid it all out. The whisper in the kitchen, the missing file box, the storage unit, the unsigned will amendment, the insurance cancellation. Seth listened without interrupting. He did not take notes. He just watched me, his eyes calm and gray. When I finished, I sat back, waiting for him to tell me I was paranoid, waiting for him to give me the same speech Mallory gave me. You're grieving. You're stressed. Instead, Seth wiped a crumb from his lip and nodded. They are scared, he said. His voice was gravelly and low. Scared of what? I asked. Exposure, Seth said. People don't rent storage units in dead people's names for fun. Lydia, and they don't try to cancel car insurance policies unless they are trying to isolate someone. They are trying to cut your legs out from under you. They want you immobile, uninsurable, and questioning your own sanity. It is a classic gaslighting campaign, executed with sloppy desperation. Sloppy? I asked. Very sloppy, Seth said. Leaving a receipt in the trash? Talking within earshot? These are not master criminals. These are panicked people trying to cover a hole that is getting bigger by the day. He took a sip of coffee. Here is what we are going to do. You are going to stop confronting them. What? I asked. But I need to know. No. Seth interrupted. Every time you confront them, you give them data. You tell them what you know, and they adjust their lies. You ask about the box. They say they threw it out. You ask about the bank. They say it was a glitch. You are helping them rehearse. He leaned forward. You need to go dark. Lydia, you are the dutiful, grieving daughter. You are confused. You are tired. You are sorry for causing trouble. You apologize to Mallory. You bring your dad a casserole. And while you are doing that, we are going to build a paper trail so thick they won't be able to breathe without us knowing about it. I took a deep breath. It went against every instinct I had. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to shake the truth out of my father. Okay, I said. I can do that. Good, Seth said. Now, I need you to sign a retainer. And then I need you to find out exactly how much money Foster and Pine Contracting owes. Because this isn't about family drama. Lydia, it is always about money. I spent the next 2 days in my rental apartment on Juniper Street, turning my remote work setup into a command center. I had access to databases through my job in forensic accounting support. Nothing illegal. Just public records aggregators that most people didn't know how to use. I started with Foster and Pine Contracting. On the surface, the company looked fine. They had been in business for 40 years. They had built half the town hall. But when I dug into the supplier liens, the picture rotted away. There was a lawsuit filed 3 weeks ago by a company called Granite Span Materials. They were suing for unpaid invoices totaling $150,000. I kept digging. I looked up the Uniform Commercial Code filings. There was a secured loan taken out 6 months ago, not from a bank, from a private lending group called Apex Capital Partners. The interest rate was astronomical. It was essentially a payday loan for a business. And the guarantor wasn't the corporation, it was Gordon Foster. My father had personally guaranteed a high-interest loan to keep the business afloat. If the business defaulted, they wouldn't just take the trucks and the excavators, they would take his house, my mother's house. I stared at the screen. This was it. This was the panic. The business was dead. My father had been bleeding it dry to keep up appearances, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And now that Mom was dead, the estate was the only pile of cash left. They didn't want to get rid of me because they hated me. They wanted to get rid of me because as co-executor, I would see the books. I would see that the business was insolvent, and I would stop them from using Mom's life insurance and investments to pay off the debts my father had hidden from her. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mallory. Family dinner tonight at the hearth. 7 o'clock. Please come. Dad really wants to see you. We need to clear the air. I looked at the text. Clear the air. I thought about Seth's advice. Be the rock. Be the ghost. I typed back. I'll be there. Thanks. Mal. The Hearth was the nicest restaurant in Briar Glen. It had a stone fireplace, white tablecloths, and a menu that tried very hard to be French. It was a public place, a stage. I arrived at 7 sharp. I wore a simple gray dress and kept my hair loose. I wanted to look softer, less corporate, less threatening. The hostess led me to a round table in the back corner. It wasn't just Mallory and Dad. Sitting next to Mallory was Trent Hale, the family friend, who had sent me the email about spiraling, and next to him was Renee Barlow, a local accountant who had done my parents' taxes for years. It was an ambush. Lydia. Mallory stood up, beaming. I am so glad you came. We just thought, well, with everything being so tense, it would be nice to have some friendly faces. Hi, everyone, I said, forcing a smile. I sat down. My father wouldn't look at me. He was tearing a bread roll into tiny, unrecognizable pieces. The dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Trent told stories about the old days, constantly pivoting to how hard Gordon had worked, how much stress he was under. Renee Barlow talked about the complexities of estate tax, looking at me with pitying eyes over her wine glass. You know, Lydia, Renee said, cutting into her steak. I was telling Mallory that the worst thing for an estate is when things drag out. The legal fees eat everything up. It is usually better for the family to just consolidate decision-making, especially when one executor is out of state. I took a sip of water. I am sure that is true, Renee, but I am happy to be here to help. Trent leaned in. He had a heavy, flushed face and smelled of expensive cologne. Look, Lydia, we all love you, but we are worried. Mallory says you have been acting erratic. Erratic? I asked, keeping my voice mild. The paranoia, Mallory said gently. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her palm was cold. The storage unit thing. Lydia, the insurance thing. You are seeing enemies everywhere. We think the grief is hitting you harder than you realize. My father finally looked up. His eyes were watery. We just want what is best for you. Honey, we don't want you to have to carry this burden. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a blue folder. Mr. Alder drew this up, he said, sliding it across the tablecloth. It is just a standard form. It allows the estate to remain flexible. It gives Mallory the ability to handle the immediate bills without bothering you for a signature every time a utility bill comes in. I looked at the folder. Flexible. If I signed this, I would be handing them the keys. Seth's voice was in my head. Don't confront, don't fight. I opened the folder. The document was dense. It was titled, Authorization of Collateral Assignment. It wasn't about utility bills. I scanned the paragraphs. My legal training from working with forensic accountants kicked in. This document authorized the executors to pledge estate assets as collateral for existing liabilities of family-held entities. It was a blank check to use Mom's money to pay off the Granite Span lawsuit and the predatory loan. If I signed this, I was agreeing to bankrupt the estate to save the failing business. And they were selling it to me as a way to relieve my stress. I felt a cold fury rising in my chest. They had brought Trent and Renee here to pressure me, witnesses to my instability if I refused, witnesses to my consent if I signed. I closed the folder and smiled, a sad, tired smile. Thank you, Dad, I said. I really appreciate you trying to make this easier for me. I am really struggling. You are right, Mallory exhaled, her shoulders dropping. See? We told you she would understand. Dad, I put my hand on the folder. I want to read it over tonight, I said. My eyes are so blurry from crying. I can barely focus on the text. I will take it home, look it over with a cup of tea, and bring it back to the house tomorrow. The table went still. Mallory's smile faltered. Oh, Lydia, it is just standard legalese. You don't need to overthink it. Why not just sign it now so we can send it to Mr. Alder in the morning? One less thing on your plate. I stood up, clutching the folder to my chest like a shield. I promise. Mal, I just need to sleep on it. I feel a headache coming on. I leaned down and kissed my father on the cheek. He smelled of fear. Love you. Dad, thanks for dinner. I walked out of the restaurant. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I did not look back. The next morning, I scanned the document and sent it to Seth. He called me 10 minutes later. Do not sign that, he said. His voice was hard. I know. I said, it pledges the assets. Doesn't it? It does more than that, Seth said. It waives your right to sue for mismanagement later. If you sign this, they can drain your mother's accounts to pay off the business debts. And when the money is gone, you won't be able to do a damn thing about it. They are trying to trick you into robbing yourself." I stared out the window of my apartment. It was snowing lightly. "They think I'm stupid," I said, "or they think I am so broken I won't notice." "They are desperate," Seth repeated, "and desperate people make mistakes. But Lydia, you need to be careful. If they realize you are not going to sign, the nice act will drop. They will stop trying to gaslight you and start trying to destroy you." I hung up. I knew he was right. The soft intervention was their last attempt at a bloodless coup. I needed more leverage. I needed them to say it out loud. I went to an electronics store in the next town over. I bought a high-quality digital voice recorder. It was small, slim, easy to hide in a pocket. Massachusetts was a two-party consent state. I knew that. I couldn't use secret recordings in court. But I wasn't recording for court. Not yet. I was recording for me. I was recording so that when they lied to my face, I could play it back and know I wasn't crazy. I was recording to find the cracks in their story. I went to the house that afternoon. I found Mallory in the kitchen. She was slamming cabinet doors, unloading the dishwasher with violent force. "Dad is a wreck because of you," she said, not turning around. "He didn't sleep a wink last night. He is terrified you are going to drag this out for months." I leaned against the counter, my hand in my pocket, thumb resting on the record button of the device. "I am not trying to drag it out. Mal," I said softly, "I just want to understand why the business needs estate money." I looked at the document. It mentions debts. Mallory spun around. Her eyes were wild. "It is a bridge loan. It is normal business. You have been gone for 15 years. Lydia, you sit in your high-rise in Chicago and judge us. But you don't know what it's been like here. The economy. The supply chain." She was shouting now. "You don't understand what Dad did to keep the lights on," she screamed. I froze. "What did he do?" I asked. She stopped. Her eyes widened, realizing she had gone too far. She took a breath, smoothing her hair. "He worked," she said, her voice dropping to a forced calm. "He worked himself to the bone. That is what he did. And now you are questioning his legacy." She pushed past me and stormed out of the room. I stood there, my heart hammering. "You don't understand what Dad did to keep the lights on. It wasn't just working hard. It was something else. Something illegal. Something shameful." I needed to find what my mother knew. I wandered into the living room. The bookshelf was filled with my mother's things, her gardening guides, her novels, her cookbooks. I pulled down her favorite copy of The Joy of Cooking. The spine was broken and taped. It fell open to the page for beef bourguignon, stained with gravy from 30 years of Christmas dinners. I ran my hand over the page. My mother's handwriting was in the margins. "Add extra wine. Gordon likes it rich." I flipped to the back cover. There was a pocket there, meant for clippings. It was usually stuffed with recipes cut from magazines. I reached in. My fingers brushed against a small, stiff piece of paper. I pulled it out. It was a note card. On it, written in my mother's unmistakable, looping script, were 3 initials and a number. S.M. Box 312 S.M. Seth Marlowe? No. My mother didn't know Seth. I stared at the initials. S.M. Sarah Miller? No. Then I realized it wasn't a person. It was a place. Safe. Money. Or maybe safety deposit. And the location? Briar Glen Community Trust. That was her bank. I called Seth immediately. I found something. I said, "A box number. Box 312 at the Community Trust. Do you have a key?" Seth asked. "No." I said, "That is okay." Seth said, "As executor, you have the right to drill the box if the key is lost. I will meet you at the bank in 20 minutes. Bring the death certificate." The bank was quiet. The vault was cool and smelled of copper pennies. The bank manager, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who had known my mother for decades, looked solemn as the locksmith worked on the lock of box 312. Seth stood next to me, his arms crossed. Watching the door, I was terrifyingly nervous. What if it was empty? What if Mallory had found this too? The drill whined, a high-pitched scream that echoed in the small room. Then, a click. The locksmith pulled the long metal drawer out and set it on the table. He stepped back. Mrs. Higgins nodded to me. It is all yours. Lydia. I lifted the lid. The box was mostly empty. There was no jewelry, no stacks of cash. There was just a single, thick manila envelope. It was sealed with tape. On the front, written in black Sharpie, were words that made the breath catch in my throat. For Lydia. Only if they start lying. I stared at the handwriting. It was shaky. She must have written it near the end, when the pain was bad. Only if they start lying. She knew. My mother knew. She knew about the business. She knew about Mallory. She knew about Dad, and she knew they would lie to me. I looked at Seth. He nodded slowly. Open it, he said. I broke the seal. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the envelope. Inside was a stack of papers. On top was a handwritten letter on her blue stationery. My dearest Lydia, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if you are reading this, it means your father and sister have tried to make you feel like you are crazy. You are not crazy. I need you to be strong, because I couldn't be. I felt tears prick my eyes. I wiped them away furiously. I could not cry now. I had to read. Gordon has made terrible mistakes with the business. He borrowed money from bad people. He forged my signature on a loan document 2 years ago. I forgave him because I didn't want him to go to jail. But he didn't stop. Mallory knows. She has been helping him hide the losses. They think they can fix it if they just get access to my investment account when I die. They will tell you it is for the family. They will tell you it is what I wanted. It is not what I wanted. I want you to protect yourself. Inside this envelope is the Cedar Ledger. It is a copy I made of the real books Mallory keeps. It shows where the money really went. Mallory will call it a misunderstanding. It is not. I lifted the letter. Underneath was a black notebook. I opened it. It was filled with columns of numbers, transfers, cash withdrawals, and a recurring payment to something called Cedar Line Advisory, thousands of dollars, going out every month. I looked at Seth. We have them, I whispered. Seth looked at the ledger. He adjusted his glasses. Yes, he said, we have them. But Lydia, this isn't just probate court anymore. This is fraud. If we use this, your father could go to prison. I looked at the letter again. I forgave him because I didn't want him to go to jail. But he didn't stop. He didn't stop, and he was willing to destroy me to keep going. I closed the ledger. I know. I said. I picked up the envelope. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The grief was still there, but the confusion was gone. The paranoia was gone. I wasn't the fragile, divorced daughter anymore. I was the executioner. Let's go. I said to Seth, we have work to do. The letter from my mother was not long. Evelyn Foster had never been a woman who wasted words, and even from the grave. She was precise. I sat in the passenger seat of Seth's car, the engine idling in the bank parking lot, and read the page for the 3rd time. The handwriting was shaky, the loops of her L's slightly jagged, betraying the tremors she had hidden from us in those final months. Lydia. It began. If you are reading this, it means my fears were founded. I have suspected for a long time that Gordon has lost his way, and that Mallory has decided to follow him down a path I cannot condone. They will try to pressure you. They will use your grief against you. They will tell you that you are hurting the family by asking questions. Do not believe them. Do not sign anything without a lawyer who answers only to you. Not Mr. Alder, not anyone Gordon recommends. The business is not just failing. Lydia, it is consuming everything. I refuse to let them mortgage the house again. And that is when the lies started. I found a notebook in Gordon's briefcase. I call it the Cedar Ledger. I have hidden it for you. Mallory will call the payments a misunderstanding. She will say I was confused by the medication. I was never confused. Fight for the truth. It is the only thing we have left. Love, Mom. I folded the letter. My fingers numb. She knew. She had spent her final days, dying of cancer, playing a game of counter-espionage against her own husband and daughter. The weight of that loneliness crushed me. I looked at the other item we had pulled from the safety deposit box. It was a thick, generic 3-ring binder labeled Recipes. When I had first lifted it, it felt too light. I had opened it to find the pages glued together, the center cut out with a razor blade to form a hollow cavity. Inside that cavity rested a small, black bookkeeping notebook, the Cedar Ledger. Seth tapped the steering wheel. "We need to get this back to my office. If this is what I think it is, we are not just looking at mismanagement, we are looking at embezzlement." Back in Seth's office, a room that smelled of old coffee and dust, we laid the black notebook open under a desk lamp. It was a manual record, written in my mother's hand, copying what she must have seen in the official books before they were doctored. Column 1, date. Column 2, amount. Column 3, recipient. The recipient was listed over and over again as Cedar Line Advisory, $5,000 on February 3rd, $8,000 on March 10th, $12,000 on April 2nd. Seth turned to his computer. "I am going to run a search on Cedar Line Advisory." He typed in the name. The silence in the room stretched out, punctuated only by the clicking of keys. "Nothing," Seth said. "No corporate registration in Massachusetts. No LLC in Delaware. It does not exist. Lydia, it is a ghost firm." He pulled up a different database, one that cross-referenced bank routing numbers. We had the canceled checks my mother had photocopied and tucked into the back of the notebook. "Here we go," Seth said. "The routing number on these checks deposits into a business account at Briar Glen Community Trust. The account holder is—" He stopped. He looked at me, his expression grim. "Who?" I asked. "Hale Landscapes," Seth said. I felt the blood drain from my face. Trent Hale, the family friend, the man who had sat at dinner with me 2 nights ago, looking concerned, telling me to take a break for my mental health. The man my father had been arguing with in the garden. Trent was not just a concerned neighbor. He was the funnel. My father was siphoning money out of Foster and Pine Contracting, paying it to a fake consulting firm, and depositing it into Trent's account. "Why?" I asked. "Why give the money to Trent?" "Kickbacks," Seth said. "Or maybe Trent is holding it for your father to hide it from creditors. Or maybe your father owes Trent a gambling debt. Whatever it is, Trent is on the payroll. That is why he is helping them gaslight you. He is not protecting your father's feelings. He is protecting his own income stream." I thought of Trent's email. Grief can make people spiral. He wasn't worried I would spiral. He was worried I would audit. "We have to tell the court." I said, "Not yet," Seth said. He closed the notebook. "If we reveal this now, they will shred everything else. We need to lock them down. We need to let them make the first move in court so we can counterstrike." The first move came 48 hours later. I was at my rental apartment on Juniper Street, drinking lukewarm tea and staring at the rain streaking the window, when a process server knocked on the door. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick envelope and left without a word. I opened it. The header at the top read, "Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Probate and Family Court. Petition for removal of co-executor." I sat down on the floor, my back against the door. Mallory had done it. She had officially filed a motion to have me removed from the estate. I read the grounds for removal. They were a masterpiece of fiction woven from threads of truth. The petitioner, Mallory Foster, asserts that the co-executor, Lydia Foster, has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior, hostility, and mental instability following the death of the decedent. Exhibit A. Screenshot of a text message I had sent to Mallory at 2 a.m, the night after the funeral. I had been drunk on wine and grief, crying in my old bedroom. I had texted, "I don't think I can do this. It feels like everything is burning." In context, it was a cry of pain about losing our mother. In the legal brief, it was presented as an admission of incompetence. Exhibit B, a sworn affidavit from Trent Hale. "I have observed Lydia Foster engaging in paranoid delusions regarding the family business. She accosted me at a private dinner, accusing me of conspiracy. She appears unable to separate her personal emotional distress from the reality of the estate's administration. Exhibit C, a statement from the bank manager. Sarah Jenkins, likely coerced or manipulated, noting that I had made aggressive inquiries regarding normal auto-pay functions. They were painting a portrait of a woman unhinged, a woman who had been broken by her divorce and finally snapped when her mother died. If I were a judge reading this, I would remove me too. I felt a surge of nausea. The betrayal was so intimate. Mallory had taken my vulnerability, my late-night texts, my tears, and weaponized them. She wasn't just trying to win a legal battle. She was trying to destroy my reputation. She was rewriting my history. I reached for my phone to call Seth, but it rang before I could touch the screen. It was my father. I stared at the name. Dad, I answered. Lydia? His voice was thin. Reedy. I got the petition. Dad? I said. My voice was flat. I felt hollowed out. I know, he said. I know. Look, honey, can I come over? Just for a minute. I need to see you. I hesitated. Seth had said to stop confronting them, but this wasn't a confrontation. This felt like a goodbye. Come over, I said. He arrived 10 minutes later. He looked 20 years older than he had at the funeral. His coat hung off him. He didn't take off his shoes. He just stood in the middle of my small rented living room, wringing his hands. Please, Lydia, he said. He didn't say hello. He just started begging. You have to stop this. Stop what? I asked. Stop breathing? Stop reading? Stop fighting Mallory, he said. He looked at the floor. She is scared. Lydia, she thinks you're going to ruin everything. She filed a motion calling me insane. Dad, I said. She put my texts in a court document. She is just trying to protect the family, he shouted, his voice cracking. Then he slumped, his anger vanishing as quickly as it came. Look, if you just resign, if you just step down, we can work something out. I can give you cash. I can give you the payout from the life insurance once it clears. You can go back to Chicago. You can start over. I looked at him. I saw the terror in his eyes. It's not about Mallory, is it? I asked softly. It's about you. He froze. You are afraid I'm going to find out about Cedarline. I said. The name hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step, bracing himself against the wall. You don't know what you're talking about, he whispered. I know about the ledger. Dad, I said, Mom told me. He covered his face with his hands. A sound escaped him, a low, animal whimper. I did it for her, he sobbed. I did it for Evelyn. The business was going under. I couldn't let her lose the house. I couldn't let her die thinking I was a failure. So you stole? I asked. You laundered money through Trent? I was going to pay it back, he pleaded, dropping his hands. I just needed time. But the interest, the loans, it got away from me. And now? He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. If this comes out, Lydia, I go to jail. At my age. Is that what you want? Do you want to send your father to prison? I looked at him. I loved him. Despite everything, I loved him. But I saw the selfishness at the core of his grief. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for my silence. He was asking me to let Mallory destroy my reputation so he could avoid the consequences of his actions. He was both the victim of his own pride and the villain of my story. Mom didn't want this. I said, she told me to fight. She didn't know, he cried. She didn't understand business. She understood honesty. I said, I opened the door. You should go. Dad. He stood there for a long moment, looking at me with a mixture of sorrow and hatred. Then he turned and walked out into the rain. I locked the door and slid the chain into place. I didn't cry. I was done crying. The next day, I had a meeting that Seth had arranged with a man named Marcus Vane. Marcus was the attorney representing Granite Span Materials, the supplier suing my father's company. We met at a coffee shop 2 towns over to avoid being seen. Marcus was a sharp-edged man in a charcoal suit. He looked surprised to see me. Ms. Foster, he said. I admit I am confused. Usually, the opposing party doesn't ask for a sit-down. I am not the opposing party today. I said, I am the co-executor of the estate that is about to be dragged into your lawsuit. I need to know the truth. How bad is it? Marcus studied me. He took a sip of his espresso. It is terminal, he said. Foster & Pine has not paid a materials invoice in 9 months. We are owed $150,000. But we are not the only ones. There is a lien from a heavy equipment rental firm. There is the private loan group. He leaned in. The only reason we haven't forced a liquidation bankruptcy yet is because your father's lawyer assured us that upon your mother's death, the estate would settle the debts. They promised us a payout by the end of the month. I felt a chill. The end of the month was in 4 days. That is why they needed me to sign the authorization. I realized they needed to unlock the estate cash immediately to stop Granite Span from seizing the trucks. And if the estate doesn't pay? I asked. Then we foreclose on the business assets, Marcus said. And since your father signed personal guarantees, we go after his personal assets, the house, the retirement accounts, everything. Thank you, I said. I walked back to my car. The picture was complete. They weren't just greedy, they were on a deadline. They had 4 days to get rid of me, get control of the checkbook, and pay off the wolves. But there was one piece I still didn't understand. Why was Mallory so confident she could win? Even if she removed me. The probate process took time. I went back to Seth's office. We spent the afternoon digging through the boxes of financial records I had subpoenaed from the house, the ones Mallory had surrendered only after a court order. I found a life insurance policy. It was an old policy, taken out 20 years ago by my mother. The face value was $500,000. I scanned the beneficiary page. Primary beneficiary, Lydia Foster. I blinked. Not Gordon, not Mallory, just me. But there was an asterisk. I followed it to the fine print on the back page. A rider attached 5 years ago. Distribution of benefit shall be contingent upon the estate of Evelyn Foster remaining uncontested. In the event of litigation regarding the validity of the last will and testament, or any contest regarding the appointment of executors, the benefit shall be held in escrow until such dispute is resolved, if the beneficiary is found to be acting against the interests of the estate. The benefit may be forfeited and returned to the general estate fund. I read it twice. My mother had put it there to prevent fighting. She thought that if she made the money conditional on peace, we would be peaceful. But Mallory had found a loophole. If Mallory created a contest, if she sued me, if she claimed I was unfit, then the estate was contested. The payout to me would be frozen. And if she succeeded in getting me removed for acting against the interests of the estate, which was exactly the language in her petition, then my $500,000 would be forfeited. It would go back into the general estate pot. And who controlled the general estate pot? Mallory. She wasn't just trying to hide the fraud. She was trying to steal my inheritance by painting me as the aggressor. She could trigger the forfeiture clause and take the money meant for me to pay off Dad's debts. It was strategic sabotage. It was brilliant. And it was evil. Seth looked at the clause. This is it, he said. This is the motive. They need this $500,000 to pay Granite Span. They can't get it if it goes to you, so they have to make sure it doesn't go to you. We have the hearing tomorrow, Seth said. We are going to walk into that courtroom and drop a nuclear bomb. We have the ledger. We have the connection to Trent. We have the motive. I drove home to Juniper Street that night feeling a strange sense of anticipation. I was ready. I had the binder with the photocopies of the ledger. I had the digital recorder. I had the letter. I parked my car and walked up the stairs to my apartment. The door was unlocked. I froze on the landing. I knew I had locked it. I had slid the chain. I pushed the door open with my toe. The apartment was dark. I reached for the light switch. The place had been tossed. Not violently. There was no broken glass. No overturned furniture. It was a surgical search. The drawers of my desk were pulled out. My laptop bag was unzipped. The cushions of the sofa were askew. I ran to the closet where I kept my accordion file, the one with the copies of the bank statements. the printouts of the texts, and the photocopies of the cookbook note. It was gone. I ran to the kitchen. My laptop was still on the table. They hadn't taken the computer. They hadn't taken my jewelry box on the dresser. They had only taken the paper. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. They knew. They knew I had evidence. Someone had been watching me. Someone had seen me bring the file home. I checked the hollowed-out cookbook I had brought from the bank. I had hidden the original cedar ledger and Mom's letter in the spare tire well of my car. Not in the apartment, thank God, but they had the copies. They knew exactly what I had. I walked to the window, down on the street. A dark sedan was parked under the streetlight. The engine was off, but I could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. It looked like Trent Hale. He wasn't hiding. He was sitting there, watching my window. The message was unmistakable. We can get to you. We can get into your home. We know what you know. I pulled the curtains shut. My hands were shaking. But not with fear. Not anymore. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a chair. I wedged it under the doorknob. I took out my phone and called Seth. They broke in. I said, "They took the files. Are you okay?" Seth asked, his voice sharp. "I am fine," I said. "They didn't find the originals." "Good," Seth said. "Get out of there. Lydia, go to a hotel." "No," I said. I looked at the chair wedged against the door. I looked at the digital recorder in my pocket. If I run now, they win. They want me to be scared. They want me to carry that fear into court tomorrow. I am staying. I told Seth. I hung up. I sat in the dark living room, the recorder in my hand, listening to the sound of the rain and waiting for the morning. I was done being the victim. Tomorrow, I was going to be the storm. The police officer who responded to the break-in was young, polite, and clearly bored. He stood in the center of my living room, his boots dripping rainwater onto the cheap laminate floor, and looked at the tossed drawers. "So, nothing valuable was taken?" he asked, clicking his pen. "No laptop? No jewelry? No cash?" "No," I said. I stood by the window, my arms crossed. I felt a strange, cold clarity. A week ago, I would have been shaking. I would have been crying. But tonight, I just felt like a general surveying a battlefield. "They took files," I said. "Paperwork, copies of bank statements and personal notes regarding my mother's estate." The officer stopped writing and looked up. "Paperwork? That is unusual. Identity theft. Maybe? Maybe," I said, "or maybe intimidation." He handed me a card with a case number. "Well, we will file a report, but without a suspect or any forensic evidence, there is not much we can do. Get a better lock. Ms. Foster." I waited until his cruiser disappeared down the wet street. Then I put on my coat and walked downstairs. Directly across from the rental house was a liquor store called the Cork and Keg. It had a neon sign that buzzed incessantly and, more importantly, a dome camera mounted above the door that pointed directly at the street. I walked in. The owner, a balding man named Sal, was watching hockey on a small TV behind the counter. "I need a favor." "Sal," I said. I pulled a $50 bill from my wallet and laid it on the counter. He looked at the money, then at me. "You are the lady from across the street, the one with the break-in. I saw the cops. I need to see your security feed from tonight." I said, "Between 7 and 9 in the evening." Sal hesitated, then shrugged and tapped the money into his register. "Come around the back." The footage was grainy, black and white, and time-stamped. We watched the empty street. Cars passed, their headlights flaring in the lens. Then, at 7:42, a sedan pulled up. It parked 2 houses down, just out of the direct glow of the streetlight. A figure got out. It was a man. He wore a hooded sweatshirt, but he didn't pull the hood up immediately. He looked up at my window. The street lamp caught the side of his face for a split second. "Pause it," I said. Sal hit the spacebar. The image was blurry, but the posture was distinctive. Heavy set, broad shoulders that slumped slightly forward. He walked with a slight hitch in his right step. A rolling gait I had seen 100 times at backyard barbecues and graduation parties. Trent Hale. I watched the figure on the screen walk to my front door. He used a tool, a shim or a bump key, and was inside in less than 10 seconds. He came out 4 minutes later, tucking a thick manila folder under his jacket. "Can I get a copy of this?" I asked. Sal handed me a USB drive. "Don't tell the cops I gave it to you. I don't need the hassle." I walked back to my apartment. I didn't call the police again. I didn't call my father. I didn't even call Mallory. I had them. They had crossed the line from gaslighting to criminal trespass. Trent Hale, the family friend, the man my father was paying through a shell company, had broken into my home to steal evidence. I slept with the chair wedged under the door, and for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. The next morning, Seth Marlowe's office felt like a war room. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and anxiety, but Seth himself was an anchor of calm. He watched the video clip on his monitor, his face unreadable. "This is it," he said softly. "This ties the knot." He turned to me. "Lydia, we are not going to file charges against Trent yet." "Why not?" I asked. "He broke into my house, because if we arrest him now, Mallory and your father will claim he acted alone," Seth said. "They will cut him loose. They will say he was a rogue friend trying to help, or that he had a personal grudge. We need Trent to remain part of their unit until we get into that courtroom. We need him to be the weight that drags the whole ship down." Seth stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He erased the scribbles from previous cases and picked up a fresh marker. "We are going to structure your defense around calm inevitability," he said. He wrote the word facts at the top. "Mallory's petition relies on emotion." Seth explained, "She is selling a narrative. Lydia is sad. Lydia is crazy. Lydia is vindictive. If you get on that stand and cry, or if you yell, or if you try to make the judge feel your pain, you lose. Probate judges hate drama. They hate feelings." He drew a line down the center of the board. "We are going to give the judge math, timelines, inconsistencies, financial records. We are going to show a pattern of manipulation so clear that the judge would have to be blind to miss it. We are not going to ask him to believe you. We are going to ask him to look at the receipts." He wrote motive on the board, "and then we are going to show him the insurance policy." Seth said, "We are going to show him that their attack on your character isn't just meanness. It is a strategic move to trigger a forfeiture clause. It is a robbery in progress." My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the screen. "Marina Klein. It is the estate attorney." I said, "Answer it on speaker." Seth said. I tapped the button. "Hello, Marina." "Lydia." Marina's voice was tight, professional but strained. "I am calling because Mallory asked me to convey a settlement offer. She wants to resolve this before the hearing tomorrow. She thinks it would be better for everyone if we kept this out of the public record." I looked at Seth. He signaled for me to keep talking. "What is the offer?" I asked. Marina cleared her throat. "Mallory proposes that you voluntarily step down as co-executor. In exchange, the estate will grant you immediate possession of all your mother's personal effects, jewelry, clothes, the car," and Marina paused, "and a cash buyout of $20,000 from the estate's liquid funds. To help you get settled back in Chicago. $20,000. I repeated. My mother's estate was worth millions on paper, between the house, the life insurance, and the business assets, before the debts were accounted for. $20,000 was an insult. It was hush money. "And what about the life insurance policy?" I asked. "The one where I am the beneficiary?" There was a silence on the line. "Well," Marina said slowly, "under the terms of the settlement, you would agree that the estate has been uncontested. However, Mallory feels that given the complexity of the business debts, the insurance proceeds should be directed into the estate trust to settle outstanding liabilities. She wants you to sign a waiver assigning the benefit to the estate." I almost laughed. It was a trap, a beautiful, jagged trap. They wanted me to take $20,000 and a box of old sweaters, and in exchange, I would sign away $500,000 and give them total control to bury the Cedar Line fraud. "Tell my sister no," I said. "Lydia, please consider it," Marina said, her voice dropping the professional veneer. "If you go into court tomorrow, It is going to be ugly. Mallory is prepared to call witnesses who will testify about your mental state. Do you really want that read into the record? I looked at the video still of Trent Hale on Seth's monitor. I will see her in court. Marina, I said, and you can tell her I am bringing my own witnesses. I hung up. She is scared. Seth said, that offer proves it. They know they are standing on quicksand. I spent the afternoon prepping. I organized the documents, the Cedar ledger, the emails, the phone logs. Around 4 in the evening, I decided to go to the house on Elm Street one last time. Mallory had texted me earlier. A surprisingly casual message. I put a box of Mom's photo albums in the garage for you. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, I want you to have them. It was another manipulation, another attempt to play the good sister while holding a knife behind her back. But I wanted the albums, and I wanted to see them one last time before I burned their world down. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked majestic in the gray light. The windows glowing with warmth. It looked like the home I had grown up in. Before I knew what lived in the walls, the garage door was open. I walked in. My father was standing there. He was staring at a stack of cardboard boxes, holding a golf club he wasn't using. He looked startled when he saw me. Lydia, he said, I didn't think you would be here. I said, I live here, he said weakly. He put the club down. He looked at me, and his face crumpled. It wasn't the angry, defensive face he had worn in the garden. It was the face of a man who had run out of road. Lydia, you can't do this, he said. His voice was shaking. I am not doing anything. Dad, I said, I am just telling the truth. You are the one who did this. He walked toward me, his hands out. I borrowed the money. He whispered, I admit it. I borrowed it using the business as collateral. And I hid it from your mother? I thought I could pay it back before she found out. But the contracts dried up. The winter was hard. And the Cedar Line payments? I asked. He flinched. That was just a way to move cash around. To keep the accounts looking solvent so the bank wouldn't call the loan. Trent helped me. He was just helping me. Helping you steal. I said, no, not steal, he cried. Survive. I built this company. Lydia, 40 years. Do you know what it feels like to watch 40 years of work dissolve because of one bad year? I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't let people see me fail. So you let Mom die thinking you were a success, I said, and now you want me to pay for your lie. He grabbed my shoulders. His grip was weak. Mallory handled it. He said, she found a way to fix it. She said if we just use the insurance money, we can clear the books. No one has to know. The company survives. The name survives. And what about me? I asked. What happens to me? He looked at me, his eyes pleading. You are strong. Lydia, he said, you have always been the strong one. You can handle this. You can handle stepping away. Mallory can't. She needs this. She needs to be the one who saves us. I stared at him. He wasn't asking me to save the family. He was asking me to be the sacrifice. He loved me. I could see it in his watery eyes. He loved me, but he loved me conditionally. He loved me when I was quiet. He loved me when I was useful. He loved me when I was willing to set myself on fire to keep him warm. And he chose Mallory not because he loved her more, but because she was willing to help him lie. That realization hurt more than the stolen money. It hurt more than the nasty legal petition. It severed the last tether I had to him. I pulled away from his hands. You are asking me to be ruined so you don't have to be embarrassed. I said. He looked down. Please, Lydia, if you play that letter, if you show the judge the ledger, I am finished. The fraud. I could lose everything. I could go to jail. I looked at the box of photo albums on the workbench. Memories of a happy childhood that had been bought on credit and lies. I am sorry. Dad, I said, but I am not your eraser. I grabbed the box of albums and walked back to my car. I didn't look back. I drove straight to Seth's office. I needed to be sure. I needed to see the evidence again. I had the original Cedar ledger in my bag, the one I had retrieved from the spare tire well where I had hidden it before the break-in. I sat at Seth's conference table and opened the black notebook. I turned the pages, looking at the columns of numbers my mother had meticulously copied. The back cover of the notebook felt stiff, thicker than the front cover. I ran my thumb over the edge. It was double-layered. There was something sandwiched between the cardboard and the leatherette lining. I took a letter opener from the table and carefully slit the edge. I slid my fingers inside and pulled out a single sheet of folded paper. It was a second letter, January 14th. The date read, 6 days before she died. Lydia. I confronted Gordon today. I showed him the transfers to Cedarline. He cried. He promised he would stop. He swore on my life that he would fix it. I wanted to believe him. I have loved him for 40 years. But looking in his eyes, I saw that he was not sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He thinks I am too sick to do anything about it. He thinks I will die and the secret will die with me. That is why I made you co-executor. Lydia, not to help Mallory, but to stop her. I know Mallory is helping him. I heard them whispering in the hall. They are planning to use my death to wash the sins of the business clean. I cannot change the will now without alerting them. So I am leaving this task to you. You are the only one who values the truth more than the appearance of things. Do not let them win. Do not let them use my legacy to fund their deception. Mom. I put the letter down. My hands were shaking. She hadn't just suspected. She had known. She had looked her husband in the eye, heard his lies, and made a cold, calculated decision to weaponize her will. She had turned me into a failsafe. Seth walked in. He saw the letter. Another one? He asked. I nodded. This one confirms it. She made me executor specifically to stop the fraud. Seth read it. A slow smile spread across his face. This destroys their argument, he said. Their whole petition is based on the idea that you are acting against your mother's wishes, that you are erratic and disruptive. This letter proves that being disruptive was exactly what she wanted you to be. You are not a rogue executor. Lydia. You are a precise instrument of her intent. He sat down and opened his laptop. I am adding Marina Klein to the witness list, he said. Marina? I asked. Yes. We are going to subpoena her testimony. We are going to ask her, under oath, who asked for the unsigned codicil to be drafted. We are going to ask her who pushed for the settlement offer, but she is their lawyer. I said, attorney-client privilege. Privilege doesn't apply to the commission of a crime. Seth said, and it doesn't apply to facts about the administration of the estate. Marina is young. She is ambitious. She is terrified of being disbarred. If we push her, she will fold. She won't lie for them. She is guarded because she knows they are dirty, and she doesn't want the mud on her suit. I looked at the clock. It was 9 p.m. Go home. Lydia. Seth said, sleep. Tomorrow is going to be the longest day of your life. I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed, listening to the wind, replaying my father's voice. I am finished. He was right. He was finished, and I was the one who was going to push the button. The morning of the hearing was bright and cold. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue that hurt the eyes. I dressed carefully, no black, no mourning clothes. I wore a navy blazer and a crisp white shirt. I wore my hair pulled back. I looked capable. I looked boring. I looked like a forensic accountant. I met Seth at the courthouse steps. He looked tired but ready. He carried a rolling briefcase that contained the Cedar ledger, the letters, the video file, and the financial analysis. We walked through the metal detectors and took the elevator to the 3rd floor, probate court. The hallway was crowded with lawyers and families. I saw them immediately. Mallory stood by the window. She looked stunning. She wore a cream-colored suit that made her look angelic and professional. Her hair was perfect. She was speaking to Marina Klein, her hand gesturing gracefully. She looked like the victim, the beautiful, grieving daughter trying to manage a difficult situation. My father stood next to her. He was wearing his best suit, but he looked gray. He was staring at the floor, nodding mechanically at whatever Trent Hale was whispering to him. Trent was there, too, wearing a tie, the concerned friend, ready to testify about my instability. Mallory saw me. She stopped talking. She walked over to me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She stopped 2 feet away. She didn't look angry. She looked sad. "Lydia," she whispered, "you don't want to do this." It wasn't a threat. It sounded like a plea. I looked her in the eye. "I have to." "Mal." She shook her head. A tiny, pitying movement. "You are going to destroy the family name. For what? For pride? For Mom." I said. Mallory's eyes hardened. "Mom is dead. Lydia, we are the ones who have to live here." She turned and walked back to our father. I stepped into the alcove near the water fountain to refill my water bottle. Seth was checking the docket list on the wall. From around the corner, I heard my father's voice. It was a harsh, desperate whisper. "She looks confident," he hissed. Gordon sounded like he couldn't breathe. "Why does she look so confident?" "Just relax. Dad." Mallory's voice soothed. "Marina says we have the votes. The judge will see the texts. He will see the affidavit from Trent. We just need to stick to the script. Lydia is unstable. Lydia is hostile." "I don't know," Gordon whispered. "I have a bad feeling. If she plays that letter, if she found the ledger, I am finished. Mal, I am absolutely finished." I stood frozen, the water bottle half full in my hand. He wasn't worried about me. He wasn't worried about the family. He was worried about the ledger. And the way he said, "if she plays that letter," confirmed everything. He knew the letter existed. He knew Mom had written it. He had spent the last week hoping I hadn't found it. Seth appeared at my elbow. "You ready?" he asked. I capped the bottle. I looked at my father and sister one last time. They looked like a fortress, impenetrable, united, but I knew the foundation was rotten. "I am ready," I said. The bailiff opened the double doors. "All rise." I walked into the courtroom. I didn't look at my father. I walked to the plaintiff's table, because in probate, the petitioner sits first. But today, I felt like the prosecutor. I sat down next to Seth. I placed the black notebook on the table. Mallory saw it. I saw her gaze snag on the black binding. I saw her eyes widen. She recognized it. She nudged our father. He looked. Gordon Foster went white. I opened the notebook to the first page, smoothed it flat, and looked straight at the judge. "Let's begin." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. A windowless box of blonde wood and fluorescent light that hummed with a low, electric buzz. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Seth Marlowe, my hands folded in my lap, feeling a strange detachment. Across the aisle, my sister Mallory sat like a statue carved from ivory. She wore a cream-colored suit, her hair pulled back in a chignon so tight it pulled at her temples. She looked capable. She looked sane. She looked like the victim, Judge Hemlock, a man with a face like a crumpled paper bag and eyes that had seen too many family tragedies, shuffled the files on his bench. "Mr. Sterling, you may proceed," the judge said. Mallory's attorney stood up. He was a silver-haired man from a firm in Boston, the kind of lawyer who cost more per hour than my father made in a week. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward the center of the room, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. "Your Honor," he began, "this petition is not about malice. It is about capacity. We are here because the estate of Evelyn Foster is complex, involving active business assets and significant liabilities. It requires a steady hand. Unfortunately, the co-executor, Lydia Foster, cannot provide that hand." He turned to look at me. His expression was one of gentle, patronizing pity. "Ms. Foster has been absent from this family for 15 years. She returns now, in the wake of a devastating divorce and the loss of her mother. And she is frankly overwhelmed. We have submitted evidence of erratic behavior, paranoia regarding a simple break-in at her rental unit, hostile text messages sent to her grieving sister at 2 a.m. He picked up a piece of paper, she writes, and I quote, "It feels like everything is burning. These are not the words of a fiduciary, Your Honor. These are the words of a woman in crisis. A woman who is confused by grief and lashing out at the only people trying to help her. We simply ask that she be removed so that her sister, who has managed the family affairs for a decade, can close the estate without further obstruction. I felt the eyes of the room on me. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. They were taking my pain and twisting it into a diagnosis. I looked at Seth. He was doodling on a notepad. He did not look worried. "Mr. Marlowe?" the judge asked. Seth stood up. He did not smooth his jacket. He looked like a rumpled academic who had wandered into the wrong room. "Your Honor," Seth said, his voice gravelly and calm. "Mr. Sterling tells a compelling story about emotions, about grief, about confusion. But probate court is not about feelings. It is about arithmetic, and the arithmetic in this case does not add up." Seth walked to the table and picked up the black notebook. The cedar ledger. He held it up. "We are not here because Lydia Foster's paranoid," Seth said. "We are here because she is accurate. The petitioner claims my client is confused. But my client is the only one who noticed that 3 days after the decedent died, someone impersonated her to rent a storage unit at Northgate Storage." The judge looked up. "Impersonated the decedent?" "Yes, Your Honor," Seth said. "We have the receipt, dated January 20th. Evelyn Foster died on January 17th. Unless the decedent rose from the grave to store archive boxes, someone committed fraud to hide assets." Seth dropped the receipt on the judge's bench. "My client is also the only one who noticed that her car insurance was canceled by a caller pretending to be her, using her social security number, in an attempt to isolate her." He dropped the phone log on the bench, and most importantly, Seth continued, his voice hardening, "My client is the only one who found this ledger. It documents 2 years of payments from the family business, Foster and Pine, to a shell company called Cedarline Advisory, a company that does not exist. Your Honor, the checks were deposited into an account controlled by Mr. Trent Hale, the very man submitting affidavits about my client's instability." The courtroom went silent. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. Mallory did not move, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the table. Gordon, sitting in the gallery behind her, looked like he was having a heart attack. The judge picked up the ledger. He flipped through the pages. He looked at the receipt. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, "do you have an explanation for these filings?" "Mr." Sterling looked at Mallory. He looked surprised. He clearly did not know about the storage unit. "Your Honor, these are accusations without context." Sterling stammered, "We haven't had time to review this ledger." "Then let's provide some context," Seth said. "We call Marina Klein to the stand." Marina stood up from the bench behind Mallory. She looked terrified. She walked to the witness stand, her heels clicking a nervous rhythm. She was sworn in. Seth approached her. "Ms. Klein," Seth said gently, "you are the attorney of record for the estate, correct?" "Yes," Marina said. Her voice was small. "And you have a duty of candor to this court?" "Yes." "Did Mallory Foster ever ask you to treat an unsigned document as a valid will?" Marina hesitated. She looked at Mallory. Mallory's eyes were laser-focused on her, pleading, demanding silence. But Marina looked at the judge. She looked at the stern face of the law. "Yes." Marina whispered, "Speak up, please." The judge said, "Yes." Marina said, louder. "She brought me a draft amendment. It was unsigned. She asked me to file it anyway. She said it was what her mother wanted." "And did you tell her that was illegal?" Seth asked. "I told her it was irregular," Marina said. "She was very insistent. She told me that if I didn't help her, she would take the estate business to another firm. I felt pressured. I should have reached out to Lydia sooner. I regret that I didn't." "Thank you," Seth said. Mallory's carefully constructed image was cracking. The judge was no longer looking at her with sympathy. He was looking at her with the sharp, predatory gaze of a man who realized he was being played. Seth turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the opposition claims my client is hostile. They claim she is inventing conspiracies. I would like to play a short audio recording to address the question of motive." "Objection," Sterling shouted. "This is a surprise exhibit." "It is impeachment evidence," Seth countered calmly. It goes directly to the credibility of the petitioner's father, Gordon Foster, who is the primary beneficiary of the business assets in question. I will allow it." The judge said. Seth placed a small speaker on the table. He pressed play. The sound of the courthouse hallway filled the room, the echo of footsteps, and then, clear as a bell, my father's voice. "If she plays that letter, I am finished." Then Mallory's voice, soothing, conspiratorial. "Just relax. Dad, Marina says we have the votes. We just need to stick to the script. Lydia is unstable." Then Gordon again. "I am absolutely finished." Seth stopped the recording. "Stick to the script." The phrase hung in the air. The judge took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at Gordon Foster, who was now slumped in his seat, his face buried in his hands. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said quietly, "it appears your client has been less than forthcoming with you." Sterling was pale. "I request a brief recess." "Your Honor." "No recess," the judge snapped. "Ms. Foster, stand up." He was looking at Mallory. Mallory stood. She did not look at her lawyer. She did not look at me. She looked at the judge. And for the first time, the mask slipped. The serenity vanished. Underneath, there was just a tired, frightened woman. "Ms. Foster," the judge said. "Did you rent Unit 402 at Northgate Storage in your deceased mother's name?" Mallory's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Dad. He didn't look up. He had abandoned her, just like he had abandoned the truth. "Yes," Mallory said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" the judge asked. "Because there were boxes," she said. She started to tremble. Old tax returns, invoices, things that didn't match. "Things that showed embezzlement?" the judge asked. Mallory flinched. "Not embezzlement, survival." She turned to me then. Her eyes were wet, red-rimmed. "You don't understand." "Lydia," she said. Her voice rose, cracking with exhaustion. "You left. You went to Chicago, and you lived your life. I stayed. I watched Dad drown, every day. He came into the office and stared at the wall. He borrowed money just to make payroll. He borrowed money just to keep the trucks running." She wasn't shouting. She was pleading. "He looked at me one day and said he was going to lose the house." Mallory said, "Mom's house. I couldn't let him lose the house, so I fixed it. I moved the numbers around. I created the invoices. I didn't steal a dime for myself. Lydia, I did it to keep the roof over his head." She looked at the judge. "I thought if we could just get through probate, if we could just use the insurance money to pay off the private loan, we could breathe again. I just wanted to breathe." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "I thought she would walk away." Mallory sobbed. "She always walks away. She doesn't care about this town. She doesn't care about the business. Why couldn't she just take the $20,000 and leave us alone?" The room was silent. Mallory sank back into her chair, covering her face. She wasn't a villain in that moment. She was a daughter who had been crushed by the weight of our father's failure. She had broken the law, yes, but she had done it because she loved him, and because she was too weak to tell him no. I felt a pang of sorrow in my chest, but I stayed seated. I stayed quiet, because sorrow doesn't fix fraud. The judge cleared his throat. He looked angry. "This court finds the testimony of the petitioner to be compromised." He said, "The evidence presented by the co-executor suggests a deliberate effort to conceal assets and mislead this court." He picked up his gavel. "I am issuing an interim order. Lydia Foster shall remain as co-executor. Furthermore, I am appointing an independent fiduciary, Mr. Samuel Weiss, to take immediate possession of all financial records related to the estate and to Foster and Pine Contracting." He pointed the gavel at Mallory. "Ms. Foster, you are hereby ordered to surrender all keys, passwords, and documents to Mr. Weiss within 24 hours. You are not to touch a single penny of estate funds without his countersignature. And let me be clear. If I find that any assets have been dissipated or hidden since the date of death, I will refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution." He banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "This hearing is adjourned." The room erupted into noise. Sterling was whispering furiously to Mallory. Seth turned to me and exhaled a long breath. "We got it," he said. "The fiduciary is the nuclear option. They can't hide anything now. Weiss will find every penny they stole." I nodded, but I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt like I had just watched my house burn down to save the foundation. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded. Gordon was standing near the elevator. He looked small, defeated. He saw me and took a step forward. "Lydia," he said. I stopped. I didn't smile. He reached out a hand. I didn't know she was going to admit it. I told her to stay quiet. I looked at his hand, the hand that had held mine when I was a child. The hand that had signed the fraudulent loans. She admitted it because she was tired of carrying your lies. "Dad," I said. He looked at the floor. "What happens now?" "The fiduciary, he is going to see everything. The debts. The shell company. They will take the business. They will take the house. Probably." I said. "How can you be so cold?" he asked, his voice shaking with sudden anger. "That house was your mother's pride and joy. You are letting them take it." "No, Dad," I said. I stepped closer to him. "You took it. You took it the day you signed that first loan. You took it the day you decided that your pride was more important than her security." I realized then why Evelyn had done it. She knew the house was already gone. She knew the money was gone. She didn't make me executor to save the assets. She made me executor to save my soul. She didn't want me to be part of the lie. "Mom built this system because she couldn't trust you anymore," I said quietly. "She left me that letter because she knew you would try to make me your accomplice." I adjusted my bag on my shoulder. "I am not your eraser. Dad, I won't wipe away your bad choices." I walked past him. He didn't follow. He stood there, an old man in a nice suit, waiting for the elevator to take him down to a world that was about to collapse. I drove back to Juniper Street in the early evening. The adrenaline of the trial had faded, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. I had won. My position was secure. The fraud would be uncovered, but as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I didn't feel safe. I saw the paper as soon as I reached the landing. It was a single white sheet, slipped halfway under my door. I froze. I listened. The hallway was silent. I bent down and pulled the paper out. It was a photocopy. It was the page from the life insurance policy, the one I had found in the box, the one Seth had used to prove their motive. The clause about the uncontested estate was highlighted in yellow marker, but someone had written over the text, in thick black Sharpie, scrawled across the legal jargon, were 5 words. "You just cost us everything." There was no signature. It didn't look like Mallory's handwriting. It was jagged, angry. It looked like Trent Hale's, or maybe Dad's, or maybe just the handwriting of desperate people who had realized the game was over. The insurance money, the $500,000 meant for me, was going to be locked up for months, maybe years, while the fiduciary untangled the mess. And without that quick cash, Granite Span would foreclose, the business would close, the private lenders would come for the house. I had stopped the fraud. But in doing so, I had pulled the pin on the grenade they were holding. I unlocked my door and went inside. I wedged the chair under the handle again. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, holding the paper. I called Seth. "They left a note." I said. "What does it say?" Seth asked. "It says I cost them everything." Seth was quiet for a moment. "You didn't cost them anything. Lydia, you just stopped them from stealing it." "I know." I said. "Lock your door," Seth said. "The court order protects your legal standing. It protects the bank accounts, but it doesn't protect you from people who feel cornered." "I know," I said again. I hung up. I looked at the window. The street outside was dark. I was alone. I had won the battle. I had vindicated my mother. I had exposed the truth. But as I stared at the angry black letters on the page, I realized that the story wasn't over. The lawsuit was just paper. The anger was real. They had wanted to get rid of me. Now, they wanted to hurt me. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, watching the shadows, waiting for the next move. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dark corners of a family that looked perfect on the outside, but was rotting from within. I hope you felt the tension, the betrayal, and the cold reality of Lydia's fight for the truth. I would love to hear your thoughts on the ending. Did Lydia make the right choice? Should she have taken the settlement? Or was she right to burn it all down to honor her mother? Please leave a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, betrayal, and the long road to redemption. Share your theories in English in the comments. Until next time.